بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين صلوا على رسول الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد صلاة تفتح لنا أبواب الرضا والتيسير وتغلق بها عنا أبواب الشر وتعسير أنت مولانا فنعم المولى ونعم النصير اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا صالحا متقبلا يا رب العالمين اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل اللهم اجعلنا من أهل القرآن اللهم بارك لنا في شعبان وبلغنا رمضان. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower mercy upon Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayh and allow us to benefit from his knowledge through his works, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Covering Imam al-Nawawi's Tibyan fi adabi hamlatul Quran, he now goes into what is when it is offensive to read the Quran. When it is offensive to read the Quran. And so he starts by saying, know that reciting the Quran in general is absolutely recommended. Of course, qira'atul Quran mahbub عند Allah. Whenever you read the Quran, it's very, very beloved with Allah Azza wa Jal. Except for specific circumstances where the Sharia has disliked its recitation, which we're going to cover. But prior to that, I had some ahkam that I wanted to cover related to reciting Quran and Ramadan. Because, as I mentioned before, if a hadith, if you have cut off in the chain, then what does it do to the hadith? Weakens it, right? And so someone who follows along with all of the durus, they know what we covered prior. We've already discussed this before in the book, where we talked about reading in the general, public restrooms that they used to have back then, the hammam, the public restrooms that they have back then, and reading in the streets, or reading in populated places, or reading in places where there's kashful awrat. We discussed those, like reading Quran or playing it very loudly in a beach. We kind of discussed that already prior in lessons of Tibyan. Now, every time I've tried to bring up new mas'alas that are in the lessons prior, so you kind of benefit every single time, inshallah ta'ala. So, reading Quran, is it something that is recommended? No. Of course. The ajr of that and the recommendation of that is much, much stronger in the month of Ramadan. So reading Quran in the 11 months of the year, amazing. Reading it in Ramadan, nurun ala nur. What's the hadith? What's the proof? The Prophet ﷺ, sallu ala Rasulullah, he used to meet with Jibreel alayhi salam and do mudarasa of the Quran specifically in the month of Ramadan. So there was a special khatma that was done in the month of Ramadan. So for us, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to also do a special khatma bit tarawih and qiyam al-layl, and then khatma also in the morning after fajr, which has become, alhamdulillah, kind of the sunnah that we follow in the masjid and the practice that we do. So reading Quran, of course, is something that is highly, highly recommended. There is an interesting view of the Hanabila, where they say that this is through Imam Ahmad, and of course Imam Ahmad, he is known as one of the great scholars of hadith, on top of being a scholar of fiqh. He had Yahya ibn Ma'in alongside with him and Ali al-Madini. One of them was the best in ilal, finding kind of defects in a hadith. One of them was known for ilm al-rijal. He knows all of the narrators by name. And Imam Ahmad, from the three, he was known for the one who was the best at fiqh alongside hadith. So for him, in the Hanbali madhab, they consider it mustahab to begin Taraweeh on the first night with Iqra' bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. So the first night, you don't begin with Baqarah, you would begin with what? Iqra' bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Why? It's as though it's the beginning of Revelation, and then you go start the khatma. Very interesting. We don't do it because I'm Hanafi. But if you go to a masajid where the imams are like strict Hanabila, not fake Hanabila, real Hanabila, not the fiqh al-dalil Hanabila, I'm talking about the real Hanabila, they read Iqra' bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq in the first night of Taraweeh. You'll see this. So this is something that they do. As for doing the khatma of the Quran, so this is kind of what I wanted to discuss. The Hanabila, the majority of the Hanafi scholars, also narration from Hassan to Abu Hanifa, that it is sunnah to complete the recitation of the Quran in Taraweeh. Sunnah. To complete the recitation of the Quran in Taraweeh. Why? What is the benefit behind that? Because a lot of Muslims, they don't get to hear the Quran the whole year. So this is a golden opportunity to have your average Muslim hear the Quran from cover to cover. Okay? So this is why, and some even hold it. It's mentioned in Fath al-Qadir in different texts, where they hold it even preferable for it to be done on the 27th night. That the khatma be done on the 27th night. And so when I read this, I was very happy because we finish on the 27th night. And then 12 South, they do the 29th night. And so we finish it maybe on the Hanafi madhab. Alhamdulillah. Kasani, who's the author of Bada'i' al-Sana'i', incredible scholar, okay? He mentions that what Umar radiallahu anh did was done so out of fadila, a virtue, okay? So, to encourage the completion of the Quran. But nowadays, and he says this of his time, because people are lazy, because people are tired, because they won't be able to keep up with it, then it's better to have a larger congregation and to recite less and to have more people come, okay? That's why you'll find in Turkey, what do? Qul huwallahu ahad, qul huwallahu ahad, qul huwallahu ahad, qul huwallahu ahad. And they're going, I don't know if you've ever seen the tarawih that they do there. In Turkey, anybody done Ramadan in Turkey? No? Some of the masajid, they do this. Yeah.
In Kuwait, they do the same thing.
Qul huwallahu ahad?
In the first rak'ah,
Naam.
they read small.
شوي naam. So they don't do khatma.
Second rak'ah, qul huwallahu.
Naam. They don't do khatma. But it's also mentioned by some of the Hanafi scholars that even if the people find some laziness to it, still do it. Nobody's forcing you to attend all 8 and do the whole khatma. Try as much as possible. Even the imam, if he has a co-imam, sometimes he has to use the restroom. Khalas, he lost 2 rak'ahs, 4 rak'ahs, 6 rak'ahs. Adi, shay adi. Another thing that I wanted to discuss, because we're talking about when it is offensive to read the Quran, is the mas'ala of reading Quran when you go to the qabr. When you go to a qabr, when you go to visit a family, a relative, and this, that, okay? The Malikis, they hold the position that reciting the Quran at the grave is disliked because it was not the practice of the early generations, the Salaf. The later scholars, as mentioned by Dirdir, the Mutaakhirun, they hold that there is no harm in reciting the Quran and dhikr and dedicating its reward to the deceased. So the later Malikis see no problem with this. Imam al-Haskafi, okay, he is a great Syrian scholar who commented Ad-Durr al-Mukhtar on Tanweer al-Absar, which is one of the most important Hanafi fiqh texts. You all know Hashit ibn Abidin? Who's heard Hashit ibn Abidin? Ibn Abidin is a hash on the book Ad-Durr al-Mukhtar by Imam al-Haskafi. Imam al-Haskafi wrote a commentary on the book Tanweer al-Absar by Tumurtashi. Tumurtashi was a scholar, a Hanafi scholar from where? From Gaza. He was a scholar, a Hanafi scholar from Gaza. So subhanAllah, look at the people of Gaza. One of the most important fiqh texts in the Hanafi madhab, it stems from a scholar from Gaza. Rahimahullah. Rahimahumullah jami'an. Say ameen. And so he mentions Imam al-Haskafi, who comments on this book. He says, he explicitly states that it is not disliked to have Quran reciters sit near the grave and recite the Quran. And this is the preferred opinion. Huwa al-Mukhtar. When you go to Morocco, you'll see this. You'll find that they have a muqri', a very well-known one, set aside that he's just reading the Quran. And then when he finishes, they have shifts in McDonald's, they have shifts in this, that. Alhamdulillah, we have shifts of Quran. He finishes his hizb, then the next muqri' comes, and the next muqri' comes, and the next muqri' comes. And all the time, people that they're visiting these facilities, whatever it may be, the maqams of different people, but at least people, as they're passing by, they're hearing the Quran all the time, beautifully recited, and the riwayah of Warsh, okay? And so you'll find that the Hanafis, the Shafi'is, and the Hanabilas, okay, the Hanabila, Hanafiya, Shafi'iyya, and Hanabila, they say it's not disliked, rather it's recommended that when you go and visit a grave that you recite Quran and you make the intention that the ajr of that goes to the person that is deceased. And so this is also based on a narration from Anas radiallahu an, okay? Whoever enters the graveyard and recites Surah Yasin, the punishment upon them will be lightened on that day, and he will receive rewards equivalent to the number of those buried therein. It's also narrated, okay, authentically reported that Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he instructed that when he was buried, Surah Al-Baqarah, the opening ayat and the ending ayat would be recited at his grave. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma. And he was the closest in following the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ibn Abidin, he mentions that if a person, he said, okay, quoting from Sharh al-Lubab, that one should recite from the Quran whatever is easy for him when visiting the grave, including Al-Fatiha, the beginning of Al-Baqarah until Muflihun, أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون. Don't read إن الذين كفروا. Miskin, the guy in the grave. Ayat al-Kursi, the ending of Surah Al-Baqarah, the last two verses, Amin al-Rasulu, Surah Yasin, Surah Al-Mulk, Surah Al-Takathur, Surah Al-Ikhlas. They say 12, 11, 7, 3 times, a number of times, as much as you can. And this is the practice you'll find of actually a lot of Muslims. Growing up, we had this practice. Growing up, my father is not an alim, but we always had the practice that whenever we'd go to visit, our relatives that passed away, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on all of our relatives, that we'd go and recite Quran. That we would go and recite certain surahs always. This was the practice. And so now, Imam al-Nawawi, he mentions there are a few instances where they are disliked to recite Quran, okay? It is offensive and disliked to recite when one is in ruku' and in sujood. When one is bowing and one is in prostration, and when one is in tashahhud, in all of the other stations of the prayer outside of when you're standing. And there's a hadith actually based on from Sahih Muslim that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Ala wa inni nuhitu an aqra al-Qur'an raki'an aw sajidan." He said, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I have been forbidden from reciting the Quran while bowing, ruku' or sujood. فَأَمَّا الرُّكُوع, as for ruku' فَعَظِّمُوا فِيهِ الرَّبِّ سُبْحَانَ رَبِّي الْعَظِيمِ سُبْحَانَ رَبِّي الْعَظِيمِ. This is the time to glorify Allah Azza wa Jal. وَأَمَّا السُّجُودِ فَاجْتَهِدُوا فِي الدُّعَاءِ. And as for sujood, then what? Exert yourself in dua. Sujood is the closest you can get to Allah Azza wa Jal, and you're making dua, you're the most humble state, and then you're in the most state of humility. That's when you can make dua and make dua and make dua. This is the best time. It's hadith of Rasulullah in Sahih Muslim. Okay, and then he said, that's basically the hadith until the end. They also mention, you can kind of see like the hikmah behind it, is that when you're in ruku' and you're in sujood, you're humbling yourself, you're lowering yourself. This is not the time where you should be reciting Quran. Quran should be recited when you're elevated. Quran should be recited when you're in a state of qiyam. In a state of humility, make dua, make sujood. But when you're reciting kalamullah, do so in a state of izzah. That's why even when you're sitting, you shouldn't be sitting all weird and in a funky way when reciting Quran. You should do so in a state of tahara, in a state of wudu. And even they mention, don't even read Quran when you're drowsy, because then you're going to start mixing up ayah. يا بني لا وإذ قال لقمان لابنه ويعظ يا بني لا تقصص رؤياك فيكيد لك كيدا إن الشيطان الإنسان عدوا مبينا يا رجل خربت القرآن كله. If a person he's sakran and he's half awake, what is he going to do? He's going to mix ayahs here. Instead of drinking orange juice, he's going to have a cocktail. But can you have cocktail of Quran? لا يجوز. So if you feel sleepy, go to sleep. So reciting Quran and giving it izzah. Other times he mentions, it is offensive for someone following the prayer, the ma'moom, okay, to recite anything in addition to Fatiha during an audible prayer, okay, when he hears the Imam's recitation. So remember, Imam al-Nawawi is which madhab? From the greatest of the Shafi'iyah, okay? So he's saying specifically outside of Fatiha. But in the Hanafi madhab, if you're behind the Imam, then you don't recite. Malikiya and Hanabila, they have a nice tafsil. They say if it's a quiet prayer, recite. If it's an out loud prayer, don't recite. Shafi'iyya say they recite Fatiha always. Hanafiya, they say no, just stay behind the Imam, just stay behind the Imam. كلنا على حسب دين الله واسع. Dinullah is only Hanafi madhab? Dinullah is only Shafi'i madhab? It's all the madhahib, alhamdulillah. في غير الجهرية لا. المعتمد في المذهب لا يقرؤون. لا, even ظهر عصر they don't recite. Yeah. يتفكر يتدبر. I personally recite. It's too much. No. Otherwise your attention gone. خلاص, what are you going to do? It is offensive to recite, of course, while relieving oneself. Astaghfirullah al-azim. This does not even need to be mentioned. When you're in the restroom, akramakumullah, you don't listen to Quran and start playing Quran. And if you're in a Muslim country, you have no choice, but don't repeat the words. Okay, don't repeat the words after the Imam. Or while drowsy. Okay, don't read while you're drowsy because you're not going to give respect to the Quran or any other circumstance when the Quran becomes unintelligible to someone. Okay? During the Friday prayer, this is very important because every Friday we have the same occurring issue where people are on their phones, they're walking and talking and, Children, they're excused because they're children. But the parents should try to keep their, children as close as possible. But he says, it is offensive to recite during the Friday sermon for anyone who hears it. Of course, back in the day, they didn't have microphone systems and masajid and whatnot. If you're going to, Al-Jami' al-Umawi or Masjid al-Haram, you have one khatib and you have tens of thousands of people. They cannot hear him. What are they going to do? Just sit there? Read Quran, but don't bother the people around you. Read Quran, but don't bother the people around you. However, it is not offensive for someone who does not hear the sermon, the khutbah. Rather, for that person, it is recommended. This is the sound and preferred opinion. I will mention a detail that he does not mention here. Imam Abu Yusuf, the student of Imam Abu Hanifa, Qadi al-Qudah, the great Imam, he would attend the sermon, the khutbah, and it's narrated that he would be working at that time. He would be writing and authoring at that time. And you might be saying, how? He's a mujtahid, okay? He's not doing it out of min jaybihi. He doesn't want to waste his time. What is the khatib going to mention? The Qadi al-Qudah doesn't know. And also, you remember, these people, they counted every second of their time, not like us where we were wasting time away watching, YouTube shorts and wasting our time away. Every second of their time was not wasted. And so for someone, if you reach the station of Abu Yusuf, then inshallah, maybe I'll see you with a notebook in my khutbah. But other than that, inshallah, you should benefit. And also, ala hasab al-imam, I was told by one imam, he told me that, AbdulRazzak, you spend too much time, too many hours preparing for the khutbah. So I said, what do you do? He said, I spend 15 minutes. I said, anta muqassir. 15 minutes to prepare a khutbah is wrong. 15 minutes to prepare a khutbah is wrong. If someone's preparing for 15 minutes, everyone's going to sleep. But if a person puts effort, you can see it also in the way, the usloob of the khutbah, and also the details that are every week, it's a different topic, new things. So, the khutbah is an amana. Dr. Awad, you know this. The khutbah is an amana. And Dr. Zaid, you know this as well, that you have to spend hours and hours, prepare, think about it. What do the people need? If a person does this, then of course everyone wants to listen and benefit from the khutbah. So not during the Friday sermon. When you're doing around the tawaf, when you're going around the tawaf, should you recite Quran or should you not recite Quran? It is not offensive. Of course, tawaf, it's a form of ibadah. They say that the asl is that a person does dua, but if a person were to recite Quran, then that's also fine. There's a hadith Qudsi, من شغله القرآن وذكري عن مسألتي أعطيته أفضل ما أعطيه للسائلين. Allah, on the tongue of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, hadith Qudsi, that whoever is busied with the Quran and in my remembrance, okay, from asking me, it's hadith Qudsi, remember, I will give him the best of what I give those who ask. So don't think that if you're spending your time reading Quran all time during the month of Ramadan, that if you're not spending that time doing dua, Allah's not going to give you what you want. Allah already knows what you want. Bidun an tatalaffaz. Before you even say it, He already knows what's in your heart. So if you spend the extra time reading Quran, Allah's going to give you it already. So spend your time with Quran. اللهم اجعلنا من أهل القرآن الذين هم أهلك وخاصتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. So that is a khulasa of some of the ahkam. If there's any questions, I could take them, inshallah. Yes. Yes. Yes, that's what they mentioned. So that's where the discussion comes, you see. That's why Kasani said it's a fadila. That's why you have aqwal ulama. Some say there's no way that Umar radiallahu anhu would have come up with it by himself. Of course, it would have been Amr bin Rasulullah ijtihadat min al-ulama. And we respect all different opinions. But the reality is, to finish the khatma in Ramadan is something that is established. Finishing the khatma in Ramadan is something established. From the Prophet ﷺ, from the actions of the Salaf, from the actions of the Sahaba, and also, it's something that's like, obviously, Ramadan is the month to finish.
The reason I was saying is, like, let's say you prayed 8, but you went home and prayed, like you did your own khatma during your salah. You can do that, right? You don't have to necessarily be doing that khatma with the imam the whole time.
No, you don't have to. No, you don't have to. No. Remember, Taraweeh is something recommended. It's not fard. People will miss Fajr and then they'll pray Taraweeh. Musibah. Allah yarham da'fana ya Rab. Yes.
So you said, I think it's not recommended to recite Quran during sujood, right? But make dua.
Yes.
But many dua comes from the Quran verses.
Yes.
So when you make those dua, does it consider as recitation?
No, then it's fine.
That's fine.
It's fine, yes. Let's say you're in a state of major ritual impurity. Someone needs to go and do ghusl, okay? Can you say, ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا اغفر لنا وارحمنا واعف عنا كذا كذا كذا, all the du'as from the Quran? Yeah, because your intention is dua.
Intention is that.
Intention is dua. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا. هذه. الله. السلام عليكم.